Hello, everybody. My name is Hattie, and welcome to part 2 of product overview for Active Deterrence. I am here in our IC Real Times Florida's training lab, and from here we'll go ahead and start off. In this segment, I'll be showing you how to configure your camera to trigger the flashing lights or the sirens, and how to set certain time periods when maybe you don't want the lights or sirens to be going off on the Active Deterrence camera. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and we can begin. So on the Active Deterrence cameras, the first thing you want to do with any of our cameras, if you use our config tool, which is used to find our cameras and products on the network, for those that are unfamiliar with working with our equipment, you can download this tool from our website. Go to icrealtime.com, and under support, there's a download section. You can go ahead and get that from there. So once you find it, in this case, we're working the Active Deterrence camera. It's going to give you some information here, like the MAC address, the system version. You can always click on details to see information here. You can even modify the IP address of the camera if you wanted to, but before that, you have to make sure you set the password, which can also be set under search settings. You can also click web and it'll open up the web browser, which I already have opened up right here. So once you're at the web page for the product, just go ahead and log in. In my case, I already have the camera activated and I set the password. All of our products do come without a password set. You will have to set your own password. So let's go to settings. So once you're logged in, let's actually move this down here. So once you're in the settings of the camera, I mean, you're gonna have your standard functions such as your picture exposure, etc. You can go to video, where that's where you're gonna modify encode and all your other standard functions. But for the Active Deterrence, there's just a couple of additional features which we're gonna focus on, which is the actual triggers themselves. By default, video detection, or also known as motion detection, is turned on your camera, as well as intelligent motion detection. Now, these are pre-configured to have the lights and sirens on already. So you can do this if you want to just trigger the lights and sirens of anytime anybody walks into the scene. However, I recommend setting up IVS rules instead and using that as your control. That way you can get really specific. And that's my personal recommendation. So I'm going to turn off motion detection. To turn and control the alarm or audio, I mean, by default, it sets alarm as the wave, and that's the siren. There are other pre-recorded, like warning, stay out, or valuables, don't touch them, and like private property and stuff like that. The count here, play count, that's referring to how many times it's going to repeat that audio or the verbiage that was said. So if you have it saying, let's say, private land, stay out, well, then it's going to say it 3 times. It can do it up to a 10 times max, minimum of once. If you don't want the audio to trigger at all ever, you can just simply uncheck the checkbox and for audio linkage and save it, and that's it. Same thing with warning light. If you want to turn off the lights and you don't want to use the flashing red and blue lights, you can always turn that off as well and save it, and that's always going to be off as well. There are different flicker modes when you're using this. You can frequency, like how fast it's going to be, but I mean, usually the medium is fine. You can leave that alone. And then the duration is 5 to 30. How long do you want it to be flashing for? By default, it's 10 seconds. And the minimum is 5 seconds, the maximum is 30 seconds. So if it triggers, it can stay on up to 30 seconds of flashing lights. You can also set a period for the flashing lights. This period does not control the siren. These are 2 separate. Always think of this as like, here it's your master category, and then these are the subcategories of it. So with that being said, these 2 fall under audio linkage, whereas these options fall under warning light. So this will only control warning light settings. To control the siren during certain periods, we use a different menu called disarming. We'll get into that in just a moment. So now that I turned off intelligent motion detection, because I don't really want, if I had this on my house, I wouldn't want the sirens and lights flashing all day long. I'd probably have this camera, like in my situation, in front of my driveway, above my garage door, mounted, looking down at my cars, protecting my cars, and I would probably have it from, I don't know, let's say 11 o'clock at night to probably 8 a.m. That way, all night long, my cars are being protected. So for me, I would, first thing, before you turn on IVS, you would go into Smart Plan, select IVS as your type, save that. If you don't do this, IVS is not going to work. This is a set because we have other cameras where you have IVS, you have like face recognition, you might have people counting. Those are different functions, and you have to kind of turn it on to decide on which function you're going to be using so the system knows what to allocate its resources to. So we're going to select IVS, and I would recommend doing it this way, which is basically doing an IVS rule. I would do an intrusion box, which is going to basically be a zone or an area instead of just a tripwire. A tripwire will only trigger when the person crosses through it. An intrusion box will trigger when the person's there or appears or crosses. That's, you get more options. So if they went ahead and did like a movie stunt and jumped down from a helicopter via parachute and landed in your zone, it'll still trigger. So let's go ahead and I'm going to select appears. We're going to do across. I'm going to leave the target filters on for when human or vehicle enters. And those that only want to trigger when a person goes in that spot, you can do that as well. You just deselect whatever filter you don't want to trigger. If you turn off the target filter altogether, it's going to trigger on everything. This is where intelligent motion or our AI comes part of the camera. This is the perimeter protection. So just leave that target filter on. It'll help reduce false positives. That way you increase your accuracy by 90%. Now from here, we're going to hit draw rule, and then I'm going to set my area. So I'm going to, let's say I'm going to do in the back corner here of our training lab. I'm just going to do that. When you're done, just right click to finish drawing. And then once you set all your parameters, you can always hit save. For customers or clients that are new to the systems and haven't really done IVS in the past, this is just a quick brief intro, but you can set the minimum and maximum target size in case if you are having situations where there's some false alerts. If by a smaller object, you can go ahead and set minimum size to some bigger than just 0 out of 0, meaning anything smaller than that square will not trigger it, the event. Maximum size means anything bigger than the following square will not trigger. So if I cut this down, then like this, anything that's bigger than this square here, it's not going to trigger. I'm just going to leave the defaults though. They work perfectly fine in my situation. So over here on the side, I mean, since we are logged into the camera, we could record to an SD card if we had it, or we can do email. I'm not doing these in this situation, but we have the audio linkage and we have the warning lights, as I mentioned, and take the snapshot. Make sure snapshot stays on because we need that for the recording part on the recorder. So in my case, I'm going to turn off the audio link just so I don't have to. Oh, actually, I can leave this on for now. I'm going to leave the audio linkage on. We're going to leave it as an alarm.wave, which is a siren. And I'm going to leave it at the default of it going off 3 times. Warning light, I'm going to leave these default settings as well. I'm not really going to mess with the period for now. And save. Now at this point, your IVS rule is triggered. If I was to get up and walk to the back of the training lab and walk into that zone, the lights are going to start flickering and the siren's going to be going off, and it's going to do it all day long because the period currently is set for 24/7 of this IVS rule itself. Now, let's say I want the lights to only trigger during the day, and I don't want it to trigger at night, then I can change the settings. If I want to change the period here, you can. If you want to say, I want the lights to flash all day long, triggering all day long, but I don't want to hear the alarm, the audio. I only want to hear the audio during certain hours. Then we can use what's called disarming. And in this disarming menu, you can set periods of when it's going to disable certain features. And those features options are your alarm relay outs, your sending emails, etc. So in my case, this is my scenario. I want the lights to only flash at night and the siren to only go off at night as well. I don't want to hear it going off all day long during the day while I'm walking around my house or walking around the perimeter, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my period for when the disarming feature is on. Now you can draw in the box areas, or you can just use the controls down here. But I don't want to hear anything from 8 o'clock to, let's say, right there should be fine throughout the week. So from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, every single day, I don't want to hear the alarm and I don't want to see the lights flashing. You can always just modify this here in case if it's, which is usually a little bit easier for some people. It gives you more accuracy here than just drawing it. And then once you set, or if I want to extend this and let's say I don't want to hear it after 11, make sure you select all periods over here. That way you select what days you're affecting. Otherwise, it's only going to affect the one day that it was previously selected on. And I'm going to hit save. Now we're going to select this checkbox where it's going to enable disarm by period. And we're going to hit save. So now during that time period, the disarming feature is going to kick in and it's going to disarm the sirens. So now if I go to live view, when I walk into that zone, you're going to see it trigger, but there's no flashing lights or anything from the camera. I'm going to go ahead and shut off the lights for demonstration purposes. So I walk up, still no flashing red and blue lights. Now, let's go ahead and do settings. And let's say, no, I want the warning lights to flash throughout the day as well still. Let me save that. I'm going to refresh. It's saved. Now, let me switch back to live view. If I walk within the camera's field of view, as you now see in the camera video feed, you have flashing red and blue lights. I'm not going to turn on the siren just for my own sanity, I guess, because we are in a closed room and I don't want the blaring noise ruining my ears. Now, as you may have noticed, I mean, there is some light coming obviously off from the screen of my monitor in this room. Now, there is also the camera itself. It's a night color camera, these active deterrents. So they have the warm lights. Right now, the warm lights on the camera are actually turned off. So the video feed that you're seeing is just from the light that's being produced from the monitor, and you're getting full color right in here, full range of color. Even though it's way darker than what the camera feed is actually showing you in here. Now, if I go into the camera settings, let's say you have plenty of landscape lighting outside your house, but the landscape lighting itself might not be directly hitting onto the camera, so the camera sensor is not really detecting the lighting that's there, then the LEDs might turn on. You can come into the camera's condition menu, you can go illuminator, and instead of it just being on auto, you can set it off and the warm LEDs will turn off, and they will just stay off all the time. The warm LEDs are separate from the flashing lights that are triggered when the IVS is triggered. You can do something like that, or you can just simply set it to manual as well in case if you wanted to increase the or decrease the light sense intensity of it. So that is how you control the actual warm LEDs, the flashing red and blue active deterrent LEDs and sirens. That's done on the actual rules themselves and using the disarming function. Well, that's basically it for this camera. It's no different than any other of our other cameras. Same features. You got alarm contacts in and out. You have your microphone in and out ports on the system, on the camera itself. Sorry. Now, the reason for that is because let's say if you have to mount the camera really high up and you need a louder speaker than what's already provided on the camera, you can always hook up an external speaker. Or depending on the acoustics of where you're trying to pick up audio from, if you mount it up at like, let's say 20 feet and you're trying to pick up somebody talking and having a conversation on the other side of the room, might not be as great. So you might have to put an external mic that's closer. And at that point, you would change the audio source under the camera audio settings. So you would change between line in to mic, etc. You just switch between these. Mic is the built-in mic. Audio type, line in, that's the actual when you're wiring in your own microphone. And that is everything there is to know about this camera. If you have any other questions, you can always reach out to our tech support team. They'll be more than happy to help you out, or also check out our support documents that can be found on icrealtime.com/support. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.